And then we are ready to go. And I'm going to pull up. You want to just do a little intro, and then I'll start your slides for you.
Absolutely. So good evening. Hello, everybody. And thank you, Lynette, for introducing us and getting us started. My name is Alisha Neverson, and it is a pleasure to be here with you all. I'm so glad that so many of you have come. A little bit about myself. I had started bartending at Leyenda. I guess it was 2017 when I was officially
something like that.
ropes. And from there on, I feel like Ivy and Shannon, who was the head bartender at the time, had been my mentor. And I was lucky that while I was learning the ropes and eventually would get behind the bar, I was still working at other places where I could continue to practice what I was learning, like Sunshine, where I have a friend who is with us today from that bar. Been bartending for a few years, not many, but enough to give me a sense of purpose behind the bar and feel comfortable behind the bar. I'm glad to find out that I actually did have a palate to work with. So mixing that with passion, I think that's pretty good.
I love it. All right. You want me to get the slides going?
Yes.
All right, here we go.
Sweet. Okay, so guys, again, welcome. And this last installment for Fill in the Gaps series during Black History Month, we're going to be talking and celebrating mostly literature, specifically food literature in the African American culture and community, and talking a little bit about some beverages in between. But primarily today, I'm going to be focusing on some of the people who have highlighted some of the best contributors in food literature, chefs themselves, authors, food writers, and so forth. Who also will be, as I said, reclamation and resistance. I will be taking a little bit of a niche approach here, talking about a little bit of reclaiming Black food culture and history and going forward through resistance. And Lynette, if you could hit me with the next slide. All right, so for this installment, we were talking about food literature, but also I was approached to it as talking about food literature in the Black community and speaking of the future. So for me, instinctually, in any time that I feel like I'm going to be talking about the future and what my prospects are, what my hopes for the future are, I always have to refer to the past. And so I really wanted to bring up the word Sankofa because it is an ideology and a metaphor that's come from the African continent, where you are essentially, looking to your past in order to see your future. And we can hear references like this in culture in other ways. Bob Marley, for instance, is one of those who might have put it in one of his songs. You can't know your future unless you respect your past. So I kind of give a homage to that sense by starting with a few women who will be coming up in the next slides who have really highlighted and been able to, put the joy and respect back into learning about your culture. So next slide, please. Okay, so this is a slide with a quote from Toni Tipton Martin, who is a food journalist, a very highly accoladed food journalist as well. It says that my hope is that the future generations will recognize and embrace the Black cook as the loving and inspirational woman who cooked our meals from scratch, sewed our clothes, salved our wounds, and nurtured our spirits, and generally elevated our character. And I provided a picture of a woman who was cooking in the slavery era days. And I think, before I go on, I think the reason why Toni Tipton Martin really wanted to focus on that is because there, I think, has been a mentality where looking at being in the kitchen is something of a lowly status, something reserved for people of color, for women to be. And for that reason, while the Industrial Revolution was coming on, a lot of people were focusing on moving out of the kitchen and out of the home. And I think that from her point of view, she really felt that there's so much richness in that history that you have to appreciate it. How could you not appreciate it? And I think that her work that is highlighted in the next slide is an attempt to do that. So I highlighted this Jubilee because, again, Jubilee, the recipes from 2 centuries of African-American cooking, because it's a celebration. And I want to kick this off with a celebration as well. So it's a celebration, and also this is a moment I think that she's taken, as I said, to celebrate her culture, her history. She talks about her grandmother. She has this book and another book called the Jemima Code, both of which are essentially collections in the Jemima Code. It's actually a huge anthology of different books, recipe books that she's gone into the archives that are, would have seemed to be lost, that she collected and put together. And in Jubilee, these are actually singular recipes that she's kind of handpicked to highlight some of her favorites, some of her cherished, and some most notable recipes. And a little bit about her on the side. Thank you. So this next quote is from Edna Lewis. One of the greatest pleasures of my life has been that I have never stopped learning about good cooking and good food. Edna Lewis was definitely, as we can go on to the next slide as well. When I embarked on this journey into finding more about food literature concerning African Americans out, Edna Lewis is the lady, apparently. It was my first time hearing of her, although I have heard word of her, and I found that as I went on through my searching, so many people harked back to Edna Lewis, gave her a lot of credit, and they all felt, it seemed, they all just felt the love that she was sharing in her work, which I thought was really beautiful. A little bit about her, I might be getting the date of her birth, the year of her birth wrong, but I think it was 1916. She was born in Freetown, Virginia. Freetown being exactly what you might have think of the name Freetown. It was a town full of recently emancipated, enslaved African Americans who really wanted to put their foot first as free people. And while she was there, it was her grandfather and a few other people who had started the farming community that she was living off of and grew up with. And a lot of her cooking and a lot of her tales and a lot of her memories really come from the basis of that childhood, a very grounded childhood and a very liberated childhood, which I don't use the word liberated lightly. So I wanted to bring her up because she started there, her love for food started there. And though her career had taken a few forms before she eventually became the head chef, one of the first African-American women to be a head chef in a top restaurant in New York City, the Neverson. She really came a long way, but her love really started there. And it went on to inspire so many other people. So I'm just really happy to learn about her, just her soul, really. Like, I feel warm thinking and learning about Edna Lewis. Next slide, please. So that being said, I wanted to offer a little bit of historical context within the time frame of Edna Lewis and some of the women that their books have been included in Toni Tipton Martin's collections. This could be a brief setting, but in January of 1865, the year that emancipation would have been finalized, the General William T. Sherman issued the Special Field Order Number 15, which many of us have probably heard of as the 40 Acres and a Mule. At this time, after the Civil War had ended, it was this general from the Union Army that was making sure that the people in the South and on the Confederate side were going to be giving up some of the land and making sure it was given back to the Black families who had been working on it. And this was, I think, a huge milestone, a very hopeful one as well for the freed African Americans. As many of us know now, land ownership, property, all that stuff means money, all that stuff means legacy, all that stuff means wealth. To have been without it, to have been without it, you know exactly what it is that you're missing when you have got the chance to attain it. So from that point, I thought it was important to bring it up because even though President Andrew Johnson did revoke that, but before the year ended, and essentially none of those things actually came to fruition as far as the land really being given to the African Americans of that time. The sentiments were still there, and the will to strive and survive was strong. So still, many African Americans were able to still use the land. Many, however, did fall into sharecropping. A few, however, were able to collect themselves, in the case of Miss Lewis's grandfather, and have a community land operation. And I think more interestingly, in the next slide, it'll be more explained as a collective. Yes, so just a little brief updating. The idea of collective ownership, similar to the kind that was practiced in the community where Miss Lewis grew up, actually has a really long history even before then, because it came to my knowledge that while on the plantations and such, the slave owners would still allot the Africans on the plantations a piece of land to do with it what they will, whether that be planting crops. I think a lot of crops that were used would be cassava, yams specifically. You hear a lot about yams being a big staple and a very important staple among African Americans. So this ideology of having a bit of a collective ownership, I think, really started before the emancipation and what we'll see later on. But it's really important because I think the biggest takeaway from that was being able to kind of have, a conglomerate of people together who were able to share their culture, share their stories, share their love, but share their food and practices, which when I think about the diaspora around the Western Hemisphere, and I think about countries like Brazil, I think about countries like Cuba, and really a lot of the Caribbean as well. When you go to places like those, the African influence is still so strong and still so evident in so many of the culture there. Like, that's just so prominent around everything. And that, I believe, has to do with the effect of being able to maintain the African rituals and heritage and practices that they brought with them from the continent, which has been so very well expunged in this side of the continent, the hemisphere, for the longest time. Yeah, and we can go on to the next slide. All right, so it's cocktail time. Jubilee, you ready to celebrate? Let's do this. So I'm gonna get my cute little glass here. I thought I went and got fancy. I got a matte black one as well, because ideally I was like, I want to make Black excellence in a cocktail. How do I do this? I could see people's faces laughing. That's great. So I earlier today was on a IG chat with Ivy, kind of briefing people what to expect that I would be talking about today. And I told her that truthfully, as the backwards person that I am, I came up with the cocktails first, and then went and did my research later. But having a touch of reference to go by. But I was really pleased to find out about Edna Lewis and find out about her time spent on her community farm, where she really focused on, she brought a seasonal aspect to her cooking, and she has parts in her books where she talks about going to the fields and foraging for the freshest berries during the season of this, going and picking everything fresh and seasonal. And I imagine something like the fields when I think about this cocktail, and I really feel like I was like onto something. So this julep, typically made with bourbon, sugar, and mint, is a bit of a variation. And what I did instead, I'm going to add some blackberries, which you can't see in my bowl, but they're there because they're the same color. They're there. I'm going to pick out about 5. They're all pretty much the same size, but I would, if you're doing this at home or if you're doing this later, try to get a similar size of berries. I've got 5 that I'm just going to drop in here. And I got some sage, but geez, I got the most monstrous sage today, which is great. Wow, it's just so big. It smells so delicious. So I'm really excited. I'm gonna get, in this case though, because they are so large, in the recipe there that I have listed, I said 5 to 8, but I think that in this monstrous case, 5 is a good number. And then of course, leave a really nice and pretty one for your garnish. So I've dropped in the berries. I've got my 5 sage leaves that I'm replacing, that would be mint. I'm going to actually tear these apart because I've learned that, like when you're making a mojito or when you're muddling herbs, to muddle the point is to bring out the aroma and the oils and so on. But you also bruise the herbs, and if you can see them at the bottom of your cup, maybe you would rather not bruise them like that. But also I think you kind of muddle the flavor as well. So I'm going to tear them up so I can express them and drop them in. Okay. And then I've got a muddler that I'm just going to first jam together. And because these blackberries are quite seedy, they will be at the bottom of this cocktail because everything is being built. Nothing's going to be shaken or strained. You really want to grind them. My table, my desk, my makeshift bar doesn't look that sturdy while I do this. So I'm just going to slowly do this over couple of moments. Really dig it in there, but the smell is great. Honestly, the sage is like giving me vibes if I were walking through a field and ready to pick them on some, I don't know, late summer day. I'm not really sure what season sage is best in, but it's great. All right, so right now what I've got is looking like some jam at the bottom of this. Right, so my next step here, I've got some cracked black peppercorn demerara sugar. I found out that when I have something that I like, I use it again and again. But I really like black pepper as a component and as an agent really in cocktails. It does help activate if you're using cocktails that that are herbaceous or that have an ingredient that offer a property. Black pepper typically can be used to help activate whatever property that is. In this case, what I found that this black peppercorn syrup does is really stretches and elongates the flavor profile. Like it really, especially with the sage, which though it has a great aroma now, it is kind of faint once you put the bourbon in, the Maker's Mark bourbon that we're using today. But when I tried it with this syrup, I really tasted the length, and I was very happy about that. So I've got half an ounce that I'm going to put in there. Okay. All right. And 2.5 ounces of our Maker's Mark bourbon. 2.5. Great. So I'm going to stir that around for a moment, and then I'm going to add just a little bit of ice first. Now, I don't have, typically in a julep, you would like to use crushed ice. Hold on. I didn't have crushed ice at home. I decided that I was going to use my magic bullet to try and shave some, but then it basically just gave me snow, so I went to plan B and started smashing ice away. It's great, got out all over the place. And don't use a plastic bag if you're gonna do that, because it will project from the opposite end. Typically when I see people using a mallet and they're crushing their ice, they've got like a nice little canvas bag or something like that. Now I know why. So that being said, I'm just gonna put a couple bits of ice in there first. I still did a good job though, and it's holding together. And I'm just gonna stir this now for a good 30 seconds. I really wanna see the julep tin gain some condensation on the outside to know really when it's quite cold and ready. And I think, you know, during the Derby days, which still exist, so today, you know, the Kentucky Derby, this was kind of like a welcoming drink. Never been to Kentucky. I'm not sure exactly what the weather's like, but I still imagine in the summertime and with a bunch of horses, it's hot and sticky. So having a nice, refreshing, particularly ice cold drink on a day like that, I think is key. And yet another reason why I wanted to use a julep, because again, I was kind of initiating this and welcoming everybody. Now we're going to celebrate, and maybe 30 seconds of talking is up now. All right. So that's done. Hopefully we've got enough here to fill her right up is what I would like to do. Just a bit short, but no fear.
It's okay, it still looks refreshing to me.
Right, I can still maybe make some room to get these in here while the other pieces. There we go, yeah. One by one. Nice and full. Putting the big chunks at the bottom. There we go. Ideally, we were actually in a setting where we can be in bars. I would have had this puppy totally domed with all that crushed ice looking extremely fabulous, but using what I've got here. I had a spoon, or sorry, I had a straw somewhere.
Whoever's out there who works for Maker's Mark, Alisha needs a Lewis bag.
Please and thank you, mallet included.
Just say a set would be appreciated here.
So there we got that, a little tiny straw. And then to top it off, I just have the blackberry and sage on a skewer to the side. In the slide, I have it in a glass, a clear glass. I still had this julep tin at home, but I put it pictured in the slide in a glass that you can see. So you can see it at the bottom. That's where all of the sage and the blackberry is collecting, which, you know, really gives something that's pleasing to the eye as well. And then, you know, the ice bringing up and just more of an aesthetic as well. But here I've got this beautiful tin, and I'm also happy about it. I don't know if you guys can see from here.
Beautiful. I'll make sure you guys see the slide again as it comes up, but I put the recipe in the chat. Ooh.
Right.
Nice cocktail pick too.
Yeah. So I'm gonna put this guy right here for now. Right. And man, I'm in a different apartment right now where I'm by myself. Usually I would have roommates here to be the beneficiaries of these cocktails. Darn. I'll just let it die. Okay, and moving on to the next slide. Thank you, Jubilee Julep, done and done. All right, okay, so moving on from being able to appreciate our future by taking a look at our past and really honing in there, I as I continued to do my research, I really found, to my surprise, some numbers as well, that there were, there's a huge, I guess, calling right now, or trend, if you'd rather say it, in plant-based diets among African Americans. And so in learning that there are a few chefs who are really highlighted and are really changing the game in that way. And so I'd like to point out how, even though myself being surprised to find out the number of people, of Black people in America who are vegan or plant-based, it shouldn't really come that much of a surprise when we think about the diet that our ancestors were typically eating on the African continent before we arrived here, which was mostly a plant-based, ancient grain diet in the first place. So I'm tracing Black veganism to the diasporic diet, and also going to be moving forward in a sense of reclaiming our health in that sense, and our heritage through a few other chefs who have really gone, writers who have gone way above and beyond in that journey. Next slide, please. So just to recap, currently the Black community makes up 8% of vegans in the United States, which is a pretty large number, considering, you know, we'll share later the number of farmers in this country only make up 2% of the entire population. We have 8% of the population made up of African American vegans, and I was shook and pleased at the same time to find out that there are so many people who are investing in their health in a really important way. They say that when you change your diet, as far as when you're trying to make other big changes in your life, your diet is pretty key, and it kind of can tell that you're going to be able to be successful in whatever changes you're doing, if you can do it with your diet. But yeah, as also we found that after the year that we all had last year, many of us are feeling the strain of your health, or your lack thereof, if that's the case for you. So it is, again, a delight to see that there are more people taking into consideration more ways to take care of yourself. But I did want to highlight a quote from another cookbook author by the name of Tracy McWhirter. And she's the author of By Any Greens Necessary, that came out, I believe, in 2010. Could be wrong, maybe 2016. But it was a vegan cookbook that was really indicated and aimed for African American women specifically. This woman herself is like the ideal, I guess, the epitome of health in her age. She's aged well. I think it's due to her diet. But this quote that she made: "It's urgent for us to take care of ourselves and eat well so that we have the energy to fight these battles." And these battles that she was referring to are definitely the battles that we're facing as Black people in the United States and people of color in the United States, of social injustices that continue to threaten our lives, and we still have to stand up, but we need to be able to take care of ourselves singularly in order to continue to take care of ourselves as a collective. So next slide, please. Okay, so Bryant Terry, which I enjoyed hearing and reading so much about him that I did purchase this book. Afro Vegan. Bryant Terry, he comes out of the West Coast, San Francisco Bay Area. Highly decorated person, definitely has gotten a lot of accolades, you know, one of the top 9 people changing the food industry and changing the way we look and eat and things like that. He's making moves. And he's also someone who's very much involved with social activism as far as food justice is concerned as well. I was really, again, just thrilled to read about his, not just his accomplishments, but his efforts. You know, his incentives are, he's still thinking about your health and the health of his people, but he's also tracing that healthy aspect to his people ancestrally. And I thought that that was really important to to highlight, because again, what a wealth of knowledge that we have in our history to really go further. But I will just kind of point out a few of the things that he said here. Yes, author of Food Kingdom, Afro-Vegan is, Food Kingdom came out in 2020. Afro-Vegan was before that, a few years earlier. He got a lot of accolades for that. And he's kind of been self-proclaiming himself as a cheftivist. These are his words that I'm using here. And I really enjoy that because, what you do and what you love is great. And when you do it for the well-being of others, I think that people really receive you better in your profession. But I'll just quickly say, taking on the idea that veganism is reserved for white people, he really wanted to show that it's not. It's not. Veganism isn't something that is reserved for anybody necessarily, and though it hasn't quite been as popular among the Black community, again, it still has its roots that you can see based on the foods and the staples that we come from eating. Next slide. All right. So the cooking gene, I think, is on, when you are talking about food literature in the African American community, I'm pretty sure that Michael Twitty comes up on people's mouths in a big way. One, because this is his first book, and this guy came out swinging with this information. I'm really floored by his energy. I listen to a lot of podcasts to kind of get a better grasp of this man. And his energy is fierce, his passion is strong, and again, energy is fierce, but he's also fearless in his endeavor. One of the things that I listened to him say was that when you're really trying to dig deep into your history, like, that is a scary thing, because you don't know exactly what you're going to find out, and you don't know that what you do find out is something that you're going to be down with in the first place. So you really have to kind of face yourself in a big way, and face yourself in a way that you might not be prepared for. And that's why I say he dared to go there. But I'll just read the slide. He's reclaiming his identity through genealogy and history. In this book, he covers his journey through tracing his own genealogy, this man being African-American and Jewish descent. Also stands as a gay man as well. He really has a lot to unpack in his own autobiography that he takes us through. But it's a really profound book. And a lot of his quotes and some of the things he's known for saying, I think what he's really trying to do is showcase that in America, we are all connected, and all of American history is our own. We may be separate and subjugated in some ways. Surely we are different, but we are still in some part from the same nest, which I really liked that concept, especially as you move forward. Together is better, certainly. But this book really goes deep into that, goes deep into race relations and how they relate to food. And I like this idea of dishing up defiance, because in his research and study going through that, he found that despite the African culture going through its own erasure within the plantation era and the era of slavery, there are still dishes and traditions and practices that survived. And in that way, I think that's what people mean when they say food is resistance. I'm going to eat what I know to eat. I'm going to eat what I know how to cook, but I'm going to do this because you're telling me that it's not delicious, or that it's not worthy, or that it's not anything. I'm going to eat this. This is my food. And I think that really struck me as profound. And as well, I write in the bottom of this that he doesn't sugarcoat anything, but he writes with plenty of spice. Add the snap. Spice is for real. Like listening to his podcast, which I didn't include in the resources, but if anyone did have questions, again, his fervor and his fierceness and his passion is just so well lit. I'm just actually really proud of the man. Next slide. All right. Okay, we got cocktail 2 coming up. This is with our trusty magic bullet. When I was, again, thinking about which cocktails to make, I hadn't yet figured out, oh no, the slides in my end are gone, just so you know, Lynette.
I want people to see you. I took a screenshot though, and they have the recipe now in the chat.
Oh, okay. I did not realize that I was not being seen. Okay.
You're now the highlight. The only focus is on you now.
As I was saying, I thought of these cocktails before really digging in. So it was another kind of situation where I was really pleased to find that, this cocktail that I'm going to bring up, which I really didn't get a good name for. I've kind of just given it a descriptor, which is mango and ginger Lassie Reposado. But I did, after buying his book, find that he had a cocktail as well that used mango, ginger, cayenne pepper instead, and vodka. Mine kind of varies. So this is and he called it the Amy Ashwood, who actually was the wife of Marcus Garvey. Just wanted to show the picture up there. I'm going to make this now. I was thinking, Lassie, like thinking about Caribbean culture and Afro-Caribbean people and fruits and staples among that I'm familiar with. Also things that I love. A mango lassie, I thought that would be great. Also taking on a vegan approach, I'm using coconut yogurt instead. In the recipe that I have listed there, I used a completely unsweetened, which I have here as well, an unsweetened yogurt, which would really lend more of the tartness that I have found to be more enjoyable in lassies. But lassies can be made differently. Sometimes they use sweetened condensed milk. Sometimes it's not even yogurt at all. So it can vary. So in my case, I'm going to just open up my little thing here. This is the moment where it might just blurt out everywhere. Yeah, just like that.
I do love that this recipe looks so great, so easy, and sounds so good.
Thank you, Lynette. Thank you. I also want to say that when thinking about what cocktails I would be making, again, because I'm going to be making it from home, I just wanted to stick to simple and intentional. I think that is a safe way. Focus on flavor and ingredients. Then you got everything else in the bag. So this, I think, actually is a half cup of yogurt, which is a few grams, but just for the sake of perfectionism, I will put it in a measuring cup to be sure. So I'm gonna put in, half a cup of my coconut yogurt alternative. Set this over here on the side. And I've got my glasses chilling already. And then I'm going to be using 1 cup. I've got some mangoes here that I've prepared. If you want to do yourself the favor, dice them. That's probably going to be the best bet. I didn't go all out on the dicing, so it might take a little bit of time while we blend it up. And
Did you recommend any high, a good quality frozen mango, or you have it?
I can't, off the top of my head, I can't even remember the last time I bought a bag of frozen mango, but I know it to be good. And I would say, for the purpose of probably getting a little bit more of a sweeter mango, that might even be your best bet, because it's already diced and you could weigh it out. But you kind of know they're all going to be ripe and a bit sweetened mangoes. Like the mango that I have today it could have waited a few more days for like optimal ripeness, but that's okay. I think what's great about this recipe is that you can modify it to what you like, what you need, as far as tartness or sweetness as well with the sugar. Just gonna put it in there. Got some freshly squeezed lime juice over here, and how much did I put in there? I put in half an ounce. Lime juice. And I was going to say that typically, if I were in a bar setting or, you know, really putting something like this on a menu, as far as measurements go, I would have preferred having a scale because consistency, especially when you're thinking about like putting something on a menu and offering it to a bunch of people over and over, is really key. When you're at home, obviously you can tweak things and no one's really going to judge you but yourself, or maybe not. But your measuring cup will do. And then I've got 3/4 ounces of some ginger syrup. You could opt to go for using fresh ginger juice. In this book, Afro Vegan, Bryant Terry uses some fresh juice, but he also uses the the candied ginger in there as well and mixes it up. So I thought that was interesting. But personally, I think I get more out of my fresh ginger, which I just went and bought and got some because I didn't have a juicer. And now I have it as a syrup that will last me for a month. So, and I made it in a Reposado tequila margarita last night. It was really good.
And it's National Margarita Day today, so.
In honor of that, I was early. What else am I doing? Aha, and of course, the last ingredient. All right. Is Altazor Reposado tequila. I'm putting in 3 ounces, which might sound like a lot, but this is kind of a large volume cocktail. You know, a cup of diced mango, and you know, half a cup of yogurt already is kind of a lot in volume, and then you still have yet to go with the ice. So I wanted to have enough tequila for my needs, but also, you know, I had the option with the
Girls got needs.
I did have the option between a Blanco tequila that comes from the Beam Suntory portfolio, or using the Altazoro, and I did try them. Let me actually just get all my ice and start blending it while I talk. And what I found, a cup of ice actually is 1, 2. I really found that the Reposado just showed up a bit better. The Blanco tequila was nice. In the recipe that Bryant Terry's using, he uses vodka, which I think is, you know, for the purpose that you actually just taste what's in the cocktail, as far as the modifiers and the base. But for me, I really felt that you know, whenever I'm making a cocktail, if I'm going to use it, I want it to be evident. So vodka was not an option for me in that case. And again, Reposado, this Reposado is really beautiful, and it comes through in a way that the Blanco couldn't, especially because ginger as well can be pretty intense. So I also wanted something that was going to stand up to it.
think the beauty of Zoom now is that when it's too loud, it's just as quiet.
What did you say?
When on Zoom now, like it used to be, if you shook or like shook up cocktails, it would just be like cacophonous and really loud. And now Zoom just mutes it.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah. So it's like hard to tell when people are done. Like for a blended cocktail, it's the first time we've done one of these in one of our academies. So I'm like, is it still going? Is she speaking? I don't know what's happening.
I was speaking, but who knows what I said by now. Let's see. Sounds like all the ice is, especially when you're making a frozen and blended cocktail, you want to make sure that all the ice is out from the bottom. And I did put the ice in last to make sure of that, but let me just, nice and frothy. I think I could have put a little bit more ice since I didn't quite measure that properly. Okay. I think I will put some more ice because I feel like it's not as quite as frozen as I want. Pardon me. So I already have, though, I had my ice chilling, my iced glass chilling, and I rimmed my glass with some tahini to go obviously very well with tequila. But I think on a mango, one of my favorite snacks is just straight mango with a little dash of tahini on the top, and that's lunch sometimes, and I love it. Yeah, see, that's better. So again, measuring, very important. You want to make sure you have the consistency that you're here for. Just gonna, yes, look at that. Okay. And just because I wanted to make it a little bit showy, I added a little mint sprig. It's not necessary, but it does add to the aesthetic. The rim is definitely what you want as far as being able to enjoy it. There you go. Again,
Oh my goodness, that is stunning.
the cocktail with no name, it is what it is.
Yum.
Okay. I guess I should just try this to be sure. You guys
Yeah, that one you should just try. We need to know.
Mm-hmm. Yum.
Oh my goodness, I'm craving that right now. It's so cold and yummy and creamy.
The yogurt in here with the mango, and again the Reposado tequila. It's so refreshing. It's not too sweet. It's not too tart. It's very balanced. I actually am very happy with myself. Okay, so the rest of it I'm just gonna save for later.
But that's perfect. Look at that. You made yourself a second drink. It's no problem in the freezer. I love it.
Right. All right. Now I'm gonna take this guy out of the way now, and we can move on to the next slide. Net. Aha. Okay, so yes, we've been talking about food history, coming into veganism and genealogy, but again, focusing on veganism, it is a bit of a privilege, I would say, to be able to have access to such great quality produce that's organic and plant-based, depending on where you are, depending on your socioeconomic income, and etc. So I really feel like there's no way that I could talk about a plant-based diet and a plant-based food culture without talking about food justice. So this here saying that access to healthy food should be a right, period, is just that. It should be a right. Next slide. But to talk about food justice, I wanted to bring up what it is exactly. And I will just read it off aloud. Food justice is the holistic and structural view that the food system that sees healthy food as a human right and addresses the structural barriers to that right. This movement draws in part on environmental justice, which emerged in the 1980s and is a critique of how environmentalism became more mainstream as it became more elite. in more white spaces and more focused on the wilderness and the scenery rather than on the human communities that are vulnerable to the pollution that those places get. And the effects of which are, yes, disparate and always racialized. Food justice efforts, which are typically led by the people who are being disadvantaged by not being the beneficiaries of food justice, work not only for access to healthy food, but for an end to the structural inequities that lead to such unequal health outcomes. We got that off of foodprint.org's website for a concise explanation. Next slide. So I wanted to highlight on that this book, Farming While Black, that was written by one of the co-founders of a community farm that is present today in upstate New York. That farm is called Soulfire Farm, and it is, like I said, being run by the author of this book. Her name is Leah Pennyman. She is the farm manager as well, so she's on site all the time as well. I really thought that this was an interesting read, and again, she's someone who, in my research, I was listening to a lot of her podcasts. She's very active right now. She's out there really spreading the word about farming as a right, and really bringing it back into the hands of people of Afro and Indigenous backgrounds, as we really find out that the Indigenous food practices are really the kinds of practices that the whole globe can benefit from. These are not new ideas necessarily that she's using to bring to the land, that she's putting back in the hands of people. There are ideas that have always been there, that have been practiced among Indigenous cultures to the African continent and to this continent as well. And I think it's really important to share that information, because while we look at the face of climate change and our food habits, I think we really need to take a look into how we can start saving our planet and saving our food based on our agricultural practices, which, I mean, some are just, it's not rocket science. It's almost just, oh yeah, of course that would work. Especially when she highlights in this book it's basically a manual and a guide for those people who really do want to kind of get back to their roots and to the ground, etc. She highlights as well Mr. Carver, Washington Carver. This first name is really blanking my mind right now. But for instance, was really innovative in some agricultural processes that were really, that he put in place that he could save the ground that was already being over cultivated through cotton, through cash crops like cotton. So in this way, by crop rotation, he really introduced a way that we could salvage the land to be used once more. And that was, way, back in 1810, even maybe earlier than that, it was actually being used. So to think about what we could be innovative with now, as far as getting more intimate with the land that the food is coming from, that we're getting, and being a part of growing it. Who knows what we could come up with if more people were really finding themselves back on the land, and in a few years maybe we could have figured out something to at least sustain where we are right now. Obviously the future is for climate, it's very troubling, and it's very instant that it could be in our near future, but every little step to take is really important. And I'm so glad that there are people who are out there who are highlighting these steps and really making it available for people. And again, as a way, kind of bringing this fully back to where we started, as a way to kind of center yourself and reconnect with some more ancestral roots and your ancestral beings. Next slide, please. Oh, wow, cocktail time already? Again? Okay. Oh, great. I was thinking, what did I make? So, okay. Truth be told, This Suntory highball is actually a cocktail that came off of the menu at Sunshine a couple years ago when I worked there. I loved it so much, and I think I really wanted to include this today specifically, not because it is essentially correlated to the subject matter, but it does highlight, as far as from a bartender's point of view, that feeling that you get. I haven't had that cocktail. That was years ago that it was on the menu, years ago since I worked there. Haven't had it in a long time. But as soon as I saw that Toki was available to use, immediately I was like, oh, I can make that. I was so excited to have that taste again. And I think that excitement is really important to remember and to hold on to when you are, in your element, when you're working, or when you are, when you're a patron. You want to go to bars and you want to go to places that have like that thing, that favorite thing of yours, and that evokes that feeling. So that's my excuse for putting this on here, and I hope that that's okay with everybody. It's a really beautiful cocktail. So what you will need. It's a variation on a highball, which typically only has just a few ingredients, and I don't even have a highball glass at home, but this is what we got. So I'm gonna put in this beautiful wine glass. I was cooking something. All right, so to begin, I'm going to put in, if I could tie this cocktail into this presentation, I would say that as far as the future is concerned, fusion might be key. We're going to see a lot of different, as the world turns and we keep popping out many more babies on this planet, we're going to see a lot more people molding and blending together. And I think that we're going to see a lot more cultures coming together too. So fusion is the future if I'm trying to bring this all back. So I've got a heaping bar spoon of yuzu marmalade, or a measurement of 1/4 ounce to be quite specific, but I'm able to eyeball this knowing what's what. Put it in there. Okay. And then I've got a 1/2 ounce of lime juice. Oh no. All right. And so with me today, I have just a little bottle siphoned off of the infused Toki Japanese whiskey. It is here. I used a jasmine green tea bag in order to do that, but if you did have loose leaf, you could do that as well. I will say that, when you're infusing, it's definitely something to keep a watchful eye on, because you definitely don't want to let anything over infuse and sit, especially when it comes to tea, specifically green tea, because it in itself already takes quite a short time to steep, even if you're having it as just a cup of tea. So you really don't want to let it oversteep and potentially make your liquor or your spirit have too much tannin to enjoy. In this case, the process was that I just took 5 ounces to 1 bag, so that I did not, in case I didn't get it right on the first try, didn't want to ruin the whole bottle. So I've got the bar spoon, the 1/2 ounce of lime, and then the Toki. 2 ounces. Okay. put a little bit of ice in the glass before I begin shaking. So here. All right, I guess this means that I'm gonna be muted. Here we go. All right, so here, got my double strain. Just because the yuzu marmalade really should have broken up, but just in case it didn't, you want a double strain. And so what I like about this cocktail and what I like about highballs is that it is very simple, you know, not very many ingredients in it. Again, simple, intentional. Flavors really come through. Gonna top it off with a little bit more ice. Right. Add my soda.
That looks awesome. Nem.
Nums.
So refreshing.
I can't wait. And you know what's great is that it is refreshing, but even in winter like this, it's gonna serve well. I'm just gonna top this off with a couple dashes of Peychaud's. Nice little layer.
Yeah, I think to your point, it's like citrus right now is so fresh. So this cocktail is like the best time is winter.
Yeah. And then just a little bit express of lemon. I think that maybe if I did have an actual highball glass, that I would be able to put this in as a garnish, but really I was thinking about it. I'm like, no, I don't think I should, but I think if it's gonna rest well, it's fine. And then just before I break the seal. Yeah. All right, and then that is the Suntory highball. Completed. This one I will drink because I'm not gonna let it go to waste. Okay, and next slide. I'm pretty sure though, coming to our close. Oh yeah, that's it. That's it, we're done. That's me. A little bit about myself and some resources. We don't have to go there, that's fine.
It's important.
There actually, she had to leave, but there was a lovely woman who asked, so I'll make sure she gets to see them.
Thank you.
Well, that's me. I am who I am, and those are the resources of where I got my information from. And yeah, I really hope that you guys enjoyed this, and that if you'll make them at home, please do let me know. Take a picture. Tell me you loved it. Tell me you hate it too. That's fine. I can accept that. But I don't think you would. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions? Anything? Now it's time to drink this.
If people want to find you, say on social media, and ask you questions, where would they do that?
Right. You will not find me on Facebook, although if you type my name there, I'd be there, but I'm really not that active on it. Instagram is my platform of choice. My handle is EL Puffington. yeah, I'll share with you maybe just a little tidbit of myself in that, right? Elle Puffington, my nickname was Puff when I was younger in college. And I wanted to put that as my handle, of course couldn't, but my nickname was Puff growing up, when I was younger in college, because growing up as a young Puff in in Manitoba, I was just, one of two persons of color who were not First Nation people in school, and I had an afro, and the white kids didn't know that it's called an afro, and they all made fun of me and called me Puff Puff. And so, of course, I told a dear friend that, and they thought it was hilarious. So they kept calling me Puff in college and Puff Puff. But really, I kind of accepted it and like reappropriated it because it was a source of my terrorization as a child. But now, I've grown into the name and re-owned that shit. And I've just re-owned that. And that's the source and reason why my handle is Elle Puffington, which seems like kind of a silly name, but it has some deep roots to it. So that's all.
Great. Anyone else have any questions out there for Alisha?
Thanks, Elena.
I'm really excited to check out that farm in upstate New York. That's so cool.
Oh, she's a really good Instagram follow.
Amazing. Cannot wait.
Like A+. Activism, green things, cool lady.
Yeah.
That's good. All right. Well, you're not that far away from me, Alisha. Part of me just wants to fucking run right over there and steal one of those things.
It's just how sad to see these things just die. That's
Well, the mango lassie you can go throw back in the freezer and have that later.
Sure.
And then you can drink your spritz.
It's gonna be a good night. Happy Monday.
Yeah. Oh man, guys, thank you so much for including me on this. It really has been a pleasure. I had a great time learning and presenting this. So I hope that to all of you out there who enjoyed this as well. And just be safe. Take care of yourselves. Much love.
Really, thank you. This is great. Everyone have a good one. And we will be posting these on to FOH. So the recording will be there and you can relive it again. So.
Bye, y'all.